The unit price of electricity is calculated on a user-pays principle, which considers the cost of production. According to FIG, the users were undercharged for electricity for a long period of time, meaning that electricity generation had been operating at a loss, which created a deficit. There were no attempts to recover the losses occurred in financial years up to 2020-2021, including the COVID pandemic period. However, the deficit for the 2021-2022 financial year was £1.38 million, and in 2022 the government made a decision to recover the deficit through the electricity unit price over a 4-year period. After that, in December 2022, the cost of electricity increased to its highest of 39p per unit of electricity.
When the government decided to recover that deficit and raise the electricity price, that was something that we lobbied hard against because of the impact on businesses and ultimately consumers. And obviously our interest as the Chamber of Commerce is predominantly the impact on businesses, but fundamentally in this instance the impact is both on businesses, the cost of businesses, running businesses, which then adds on the cost of the consumer. We are paying a higher rate for electricity at the moment. Our argument is, well, hold on, we're in a cost of living crisis right now. The price of electricity is entirely within the government's gift to change. They are able to set the price of electricity as they want. It's one of the unusual facets of the Falklands in that we can say, actually, to offset the cost of living for society, we can change the price of electricity. This is a major problem. This is a point where this is an election year. We're all cognizant of that. I think the price of electricity, the reliability of electricity, is likely to become an election issue, and we think quite strongly that it should be.
Apart from the deficit, electricity price also includes depreciation costs on assets used in the electricity production, such as power station structure, generators, and renewable energy systems.
In the balance book, you'll see straight away, so the electricity supply is there. They're making a profit of £1,688,000 is an anticipated profit for this financial year. They've then included this depreciation, which is ridiculous. We've already paid for assets, so why are we paying for depreciation again on an asset? But even if you do include that, then that's still making a profit of £640,000 for this financial year, which is over half of what the deficit was anyway. Now, bearing in mind the electricity price in 2023 up until the 1st of July 2024, we could all argue that we have now paid that back.
So it really comes down to setting the policy about what we're going to do about the cost of living and the cost of electricity, particularly in this instance. There are ways they can do that. There are mechanisms to do that. It will require some decision making. It will require understanding that yes, electricity might then make a loss or only just break even. That's a decision that can be made. Particularly looking at the depreciation of an asset that you already pay for with public money, and then you're paying for depreciation on it again. I find that very difficult to understand how we're paying for something twice.
Chamber of Commerce raised the concern that depreciation costs have technically been paid twice. Can you give me a comment on that?
Well, I think that's a very strange comment by the Chamber of Commerce. If we said to the Chamber of Commerce that when they charge people for the services from their commercial companies, that they've paid for the building or whatever of their shop that they're selling that from profits in the past, and they shouldn't be actually taking that into account when they add the margins on for people. I mean, it's not a way that anyone does business anywhere in the world. So I'm very surprised at that comment from the Chamber of Commerce.
In 2023, FIG agreed to reduce the amount of years to recover the deficit to 3 years instead of 4, and to write off £269,000 of the 2021-2022 deficit, and an amount of £300,000 for the impairment of the failed number 7 generator, to help reduce the amount that needs to be recovered. This resulted in a drop in the unit price of electricity from 39p to 35p. in October 2023, resulting in the remaining deficit to recover of just over £1 million.
At that time, the rate of inflation was quite high. There were concerns about the affordability for people in the community, and we did our utmost to bring that down. We went against the recommendations of the officers. We went for a more generous scheme that over 3 years would look to recover those costs, but also to write off some of the deficit. The cost of living at the moment is running at less than 1% per annum, the rise in the cost of living, the RPI. So there wasn't the pressure on, from that point of view, to bring down the rate of inflation. I would say, yes, we do consider those sorts of factors in making a decision. And we also consider that we need to get rid of the deficit. The quicker we get rid of the deficit, the quicker we can bring down electricity prices for everybody. We also had an issue with the price of diesel that's sold to the power station. There's a 10% discount given by Stanley Services on the price of diesel. But because of a quirk that when it went above 70p, it pushed up the price of diesel at the pumps here. Because Stanley Services make 1.5% on the price of fuel. Stanley Services weren't bothered whether or not they gave the 10% to the power station or they passed on the money to the consumer through the pump. But they asked government, which would you prefer? And the government chose to bring down the cost of diesel to the consumer because it was more beneficial from bringing down the cost of living to people than continuing to have the 10% discount on the diesel to the power station. But it's reinstated when the price of diesel drops below 70 pence per litre. So it's back in action now. The discount is being provided, and that helps write the deficit off. But that's why the deficit has gone down slower than expected, because we were actually trying to make the cost of living as low as possible to people in the community.
Electricity prices review took place during the closed section of the latest Standing Finance Committee, where MLAs were presented with various price reduction options. After discussing the available options, the votes split, leaving the electricity prices unchanged.
My view, and I voted to maintain the policy as we had it, was that it may not be a popular decision, but it's the right decision because of the fact that we bring down the price of electricity at an earlier stage than we would have done by stretching out the repayment of the deficit. So that's, that was my view, and also the time that we had to implement any reductions. It would have meant that we couldn't have done it for a couple of months anyway.